In February of 1996, at age 15, Josh, my mother, and my cousin Michelle joined me and a group of us on a missions trip to the Dominican Republic. If you ever have the opportunity to take your kids on a missions trip, do so. It's cheaper than either bail or attorney fees. And for some of them, like Joshua, it will change their lives and their view of the world. He saw people for the first time who had little earthly possessions, but were filled with passion for God. While in the Dominican Republic, after working a previous day in 100-plus degree heat on the top of a roof of a church, Josh got very sick. He was feverish, he was vomiting, and I had to leave him the next morning to go to the job site because I was the only one that could drive the van in the Dominican Republic. Our Dominican host, the mother of 2 children who couldn't speak English, insisted that she would be his mother and that I must go. Little did I know she would call the women of the church together, gather around him, and for a considerable period of time, pray for him in Spanish fervently for the Lord to heal him. God did. When I got back home, I was a little irritated because I heard him laughing in the courtyard and thought he just figured out another creative way to get out of a day of work. But there he was sitting with Patricio, this woman's son, who was also struggling with his walk for God. He told me later on that Patricio told him that his mother believed God had let him get sick so he could stay home and talk to Patricio. When we left, Patricio cried. Josh left all of his clothes, including his brand new expensive Nike shoes for Patricio, and I cried. But what he left was a part of himself in the Dominican Republic. When we arrived home, he was filled with a new passion to do something for God, but he felt confined and perhaps even defined as the pastor's kid in our little church. He loved driving the people in Cornerstone crazy, the youth leaders and everybody else, but getting up each Sunday became more and more difficult until one Sunday morning he announced, "Our church is stupid. I'm not going anymore." To which I responded, "Fine, Josh, where are you going to live?" I said, "Everybody goes to church in our house, so get out of bed, go to church somewhere, or find a new place to live." His mother cried on the way to church, and we came home, he was gone. Much to my relief, he had gone to church. His rebellion took him here to Allison Park Church, where some of his high school friends had invited him at the critical juncture of his life. Never underestimate what it means when you invite somebody to come with you. It meant all the difference for him in his life. He didn't have to deal with his pastor dad here, but he did have Pastor Cal and Pastor Jeff and dozens of people whose names I never knew. Soon they saw the possibilities in Josh, and that rebel was given a cause. The people in Allison Park discipled him, trained him, set him to leading and eventually multiplying teen groups. They saw his possibilities. They directed his energy. They pointed him towards Jesus and the kingdom. I admit it was a hard thing in those days, feeling rejected by my son, but having all of these people come up to me and tell me what a wonderful person he was. So I had to be proud of him at the same time. But make no mistake about it, it was not easy. Kathy and I made one of the hardest choices we ever made in our lives to entrust him into the hands of Allison Park. They didn't disappoint us. His passion to serve God grew. He rejected out of hand, however, any notion that he might be called to some life dedicated to serving God in a full-time way. He wanted to serve God, mind you, but he saw serving Jesus as something we should all do no matter where we are and what we're doing. He believed that God did set some people apart for full-time ministry, just not him. And his role would be to help other people, to support other people. And so he left for Roberts Wesleyan College to pursue a degree in engineering. While he was there, he took practical jokes and pranks to a level that resulted in numerous calls from the administration in college. If I had a nickel, well, you get the point. At one point, Josh was pointed out by the top administrator of the school as orchestrating a group who created a social networking site. Oh, to God that he had called it Facebook or MySpace. But he didn't. But what they were successful in doing was causing his site to come up first in all of the web engine searches. So there, students could go on and rate how a professor's class was that morning. They could go on and talk about the latest fare in the cafeteria. And it made the administrators of the school insane. It was a hard-fought, negotiated settlement, I might add, where I convinced Josh to give the school the website, and Roberts agreed not to expel Josh. In the midst of imaginative and outrageous pranks, and I'm sure some of you will share those with me later, that went way too far, God kept speaking to Joshua. He began to see that engineering, while a good profession and while noble, was not what God was tugging. And somehow he ended up with a book from Mildred Uhler. I don't know who she is, but I assume she's from New York somewhere. Mildred ever knows. Either Josh borrowed the book, took it, or she gave it to him. But the book was called Jungle Pilot, The Life and Witness of Nate Saint. Josh later read the book Through the Gates of Splendor by Elizabeth Elliot, which was the account of a group of young missionaries attempting to take the gospel to an unreached tribe in Ecuador known for their violence and murder. In 1956, 5 of those missionaries, husbands, fathers, brothers, and sons, were martyred. Their story was the story of selfless abandonment for the good news of hope and forgiveness. It was a story of those 5 missionaries being martyred that captured Josh's heart. And he began to call me and send the words, He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. The words of Jim Elliot in his diary. Josh reread those stories many, many times, especially during the difficult times of his journey. He writes on November 25th, 2002, Josh writes in his journal, I've finished reading a few chapters of Jim Elliot's book. This man who died almost 50 years ago could be a close friend, bringing new light to my life and value of Jesus Christ. God used a story, and that story began to place in Josh an outrageous dream. A dream of being a missionary pilot and using those skills to take the gospel wherever he might go. In 2002, Josh left Roberts for Geneva College and Beaver County Community College's flight program. He had never been on the campus of either school. He didn't have housing when he first got there, so he lived on the soccer field. We didn't know that until this past week. It wasn't easy for him, but it was good. He had a determination to ground his faith and get his wings. He jumped into the youth ministry program there and jumped into flying. He worked hard, he played hard, and he shared his outrageous dream with anybody who would listen. And along the way, perhaps he organized a prank or two. At Geneva, he built friendships. He was fortunate to be mentored by wonderful men and women. He soaked up great counsel. He became the son of many mothers and fathers in that community. He was hopeful. He had his goals